Hi, everyone. Welcome to Counterstream, the monthly podcast where we present you major news shaping the world, which are not represented in mainstream media. We bring you critical perspectives on the biggest events shaping our reality. My name is Julijana, your host, and I'm here with my new co host, Kinza. Hi, Kinza.
Hi, Juliana. It's very nice to be on Counterstream, and I'm really looking forward to this episode.
It's really nice to have you here. I think we should just start right away. In retro perspective to the last month, there is one major topic that everyone needs to talk about. We will start with the new kingdom of the United States of America and their King Trump. And before we head into the US topic, I just want to point out a little fact about Trump by comparing him to one of the probably greatest emperors on planet Earth, the Roman Emperor Caligula, where you can see they have some interesting parallels. Caligula was known for, kind of humiliating and intimidating the Senate and the army. He offended everyone, especially, funnily, people in Jerusalem, by declaring himself a god. He reigned with terror and arrested everyone who was disagreeing with him. And one maybe, well, I think it's a fun fact, which is not proven, but he supposedly made his horse a consul. The most funny fact about Caligula is, and where he really lost support in the end, was when he made his army go to war against the ocean. He made them punch with swords at the waves, and they were supposed to get seashells as kind of, to reap the treasure of victory over the sea god Neptune. And I guess that was the point where everyone is like, this guy needs to go. But I brought up the story because I think when you heard that probably sometime in history, in your history class, you were going like, this is insane. Yet here we are, 2025. And I think going to war with the sea is something that I would clearly see Trump doing. Uh, I don't know how you see it, but I would totally, and I think many people as well.
Yeah. I think the first few days of Trump being in office has been just absolute chaos. And I mean, if it's not just going on war with sea, with everything around you, everything that is surrounding you, then I can't think of a better analogy that fits so much to what's been happening in the US. And it's also like something that I would like to bring up now. This is an intentional shock and awe strategy, which is being executed right now by the Trump government, by the cabinet, by his chosen ministers. They've said it over and over and over in mainstream media, in on TV shows, talk shows, that it's just about shock and awe. And shock and awe basically means to overwhelm the masses with so much information, so many attacks against democratic freedoms and their rights that they end up becoming paralyzed instead of systematically navigating the new barrage of authoritarian measures being imposed on them. And we have seen, in fact, like a lot of these things taking place. Like it's there's been blatant attacks on human rights, on women's rights, on LGBTQ rights. There's only now two genders which will be officially recognized in the US. It's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling, and it's impossible to keep on track as well of everything that has taken place since his day in office. And I think the thing is that we should not actually try to keep track of what's happening, but rather try to, see it as like, okay, this was their strategy. They said they're going to do it, and they are in fact doing it. This is a psychological warfare against us. And how do we respond to it in the way that makes the most sense without losing ourselves? And a lot of it is also about the optics of it, how it seems on media, how it seems on social media, the way he's communicating. It's just absolutely unhinged. I have two clips that I saw, which were the peak of brutality of Trump's policies that I've seen, that I would like to play actually. And the first one is a video of like illegal deportation flights where immigrants are being deported in chains with like the title ASMR, which is like a tickling sound on the back of your neck, which is a TikTok trend in reaction to different sounds and how people react to it. And he uses that word on the official White House page to refer to immigrants who have an illegal status or an irregular status in the US and making like a whole optical show out of like chains jingling and, like handcuffed and, like dehumanization in the worst form, basically.
Tunnels coming to set you free, bringing the light for all to see. No more tunnels, no more fear. Trump Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza number one. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza number one.
Right. So we saw two of the most, how can I say, horrible, dystopic Black Mirror episode demonstrations of what Trump's America looks like and what it will continue to look like for the next few months and years. And yeah, it's absolutely absurd that this whole show is being. I mean, sometimes I also feel like the media gives him way too much coverage. Like he does this stuff to get the coverage, and then everybody reshares this stuff. Like, I'm also, like complicit in it because it's so horrible that you feel like, okay, the world needs to see this. Because, but the thing is, he's at the same time intentionally wanting people to share it as much as possible. And we give him that. We do end up like reacting to it in ways that, he wants us to react. He wants it to become a show.
Just to think that somebody showed him this video and he went like, oh, I love this. This is great, with the song about Trump and Gaza in the background, and thinking that he celebrates himself and he thinks that that presents a vision, like that underlines what he's been saying, that it will be great, is mind blowing. We clearly see that we departed from any common sense or reality. I think that he exists in a different reality than the rest of the world, and that's very, very dangerous. Hence also the comparison to Caligula before. It's just a departure of, okay, we are not in a common shared reality anymore. There's a reality of people like Trump and Musk, and there's the rest of us.
Yeah.
And I think it is important though that his supporters see this, in my opinion, because I think between Trump is great and Trump is declaring himself a king is a big step even for them. The signs were there,
Yeah.
I'm glad for everyone that changes their minds, for sure, but it's not like it, it wasn't visible from the beginning that this was going to become even more absurd than the first round. Also, one thing, it's there's a lot of symbolism in what he does, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, I talked to a friend of mine about his executive order to ban trans women from getting scholarship for sports, for women's sports. Imagine, like, he does this whole procedure, even an executive order is a lot of work, and then he sits down and he declares that he's saving women's sport. You know how many transgender women have gotten a scholarship in the US?
I don't know.
4.
That's a joke. That's a joke.
He practically saved women's sports from 4 transgender women.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Like my friend said, like basically he fucked up the life of 4 people
Yeah.
for nothing, I mean, so and this is where the problem is, in my opinion, that before he was elected, people
Mm.
were thinking that transgender women, for example, are a huge threat to women's sports, and people were like, but we have to discuss this because it's unfair, they have different bodies, they have this and that. And I mean, activists have been saying, of what a percentage of people you're talking about? It's absurd. It's none of your problem. It's not none of your business, and it's really not your main problem right now. So this is the consequence. And he gathers all those young children and women, in his office, and is like, look, I've saved women's sports.
Yeah.
And it's important, I think, that we point to these facts, like
Yeah.
what did he actually do. With other things, it's evident in itself, to be honest. Like if anyone looks at the Gaza video, and I think only probably Netanyahu like people look at it and are like, great. Although I don't know if they would support the big golden statue of Trump, but you
Or
know
more of the Gaza Strip, I think it will be a fair deal for them as well.
yeah,
Yes,
for them it's like better than those Palestinians.
yeah, yeah,
I'd rather have the Gaza Strip full of statues of Trump than one Palestinian in there. So
exactly.
yeah, it's a really bad sign of the times.
Yeah,
The other thing, absurd thing, was renaming the Gulf of Mexico, for example.
yeah, 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 yeah. This is the thing, like he does a lot of things which are just for the show, right? This is like, these are things like, I mean, it's a big step, yes, like after hundreds of years you rename something to something it's not, and then Google follows suit and renames it as well. Like this is like, there is the absurdity politics of it, right? Which is just done to piss people off and to show his supporters, look, I delivered. I promised you I'm, going to deliver on only two genders and, against trans rights. Here you go. But the effect is like not really much. It's more a lot of, as you said, a lot of symbolism to, signal to his voters right now that I am delivering. I'm the person who's going to deliver. I promised I would do it. Here you go. But the bigger thing that should worry us, I think, is the fact that he has removed all references of climate change from all government communication. So this is a president, like, I mean, who is literally attacking science. This is a president who wants to shut down the government Ministry of Education in the US. He is also trying to, like, the real consequences of his policies, right? Like the, say, social security numbers of millions of Americans that now are given access to Elon Musk. And this is something that is like, he has absolute monopoly and absolute information over like all his like rivals, which are business rivals, all the people who oppose him, all the people who might be whistleblowers. This is like grave, grave things in terms of human rights, in terms of like democratic freedoms, fundamental rights. It's a clear, clear attack. And I sometimes actually, I mean, it's clear, like if this was happening in another country, the US would have attacked and intervened to save this country right now. And I really wonder, like, why am I not hearing about like mass protests in the US? What will it take them? Like, I get it, there's a lot of shock and awe, and there's a lot of time needed right now to comprehend the scale of everything. But what is going to be the tipping point?
There's a danger that we give him too less credit for the bigger picture, because I think he has a bigger picture. For example, you kind of weaken the resistance by overwhelming people, simply like by, as you say, they're in shock, and some people are already protesting, but it's far from a mass protest in the US. I just recently thought, imagine you live in the US and every time you wake up the news is dystopian, one more ridiculous thing that he has done, and at some point you won't turn the TV anymore on because you can't stand it anymore, and that's of course the wrong way, is to look away. But I think with everything that he does, he legitimizes something way worse that he is probably going to do. Right now you see people in chains, you see those chains, okay? So people say, well, he's deporting illegal migrants. One
Mm,
day he's going to put other people in chains and nobody will ask questions anymore, because it will become a very common picture to see people in chains. As it goes for his executive orders, they will pile up, and here and there will be executive orders which are way more devastating than what we saw, if that's even possible, people
yeah,
think, but it is possible. But people will be, their brains will be already, uh um, too mellow to even look at it in a
mm,
proper way. And
mm,
also renaming the Gulf of Mexico has further down the road implications. Also, with him saying, I want Greenland, I want Canada. I
Mm,
think it's a joke, but it's also not a joke. I think this is
mm,
something that Canadians are afraid of,
yeah,
rightfully so. And we have a Canadian group in DM25, and I've talked recently to them, and they are scared. They're truly scared of
yeah,
what the US is doing. So
yeah.
there is a huge danger. Also, one last point on that, he is in a hurry, I realized, because in
Mm,
2 years the Senate seats will be again voted on. So the Republicans hold a majority, but not a big majority. So the Democrats could take over the Senate in 2 years. And
mm,
then it's up to them, of course, to have a backbone and deliver on it. So, but they can essentially block a lot of things then.
right.
So with him losing support in numbers also day by day, he could end up losing the Senate in 2 years. Therefore, I think especially in the first 2 years of Trump, we will see the most devastating things. And then he might be kind of a bit
Yeah,
slowed down if he
absolutely.
doesn't try to run for a third term and change the constitution until then, of course.
Yeah,
And maybe
yeah.
then
This whole
forbid the Democratic Party from existing.
Yeah, this whole rush thing, like you're absolutely right. I mean, it does seem like okay, everything is like, bam, bam, bam. Like what's the rush, right? I was also thinking that it's a lot to do with delivering at the beginning because that's what people remember at the beginning of your presidency. And when the spark is there, the hopes are high from Republican voters. He can say, oh, I did all of that, and maybe the rest of the term he doesn't do as much, but like he can just say, oh yeah, you see, I'm such a good president. And yeah, like with Elon Musk in government as well, I mean, it's looking very, very unpredictable for the US. Now coming back to coming back or going away from US domestic politics to foreign policy and what's happening between the US, Ukraine, and Russia, it is also absolutely mind blowing, and it is deeply, deeply concerning. Juliana, maybe you want to share some thoughts on it. I've maybe first give a bit of the context of what's happening, and yeah, then we can dive into it.
Yeah, I mean, basically all we know from the start was that Trump said he's going to end the Ukraine-Russia war very, very fast. So obviously he hasn't delivered on the point to do it on the first day in office because he
Mm.
was busy freeing 15,000 um, people from
1500.
prison.
Yeah,
1,500.
yeah,
No, was it not like a few thousands?
I'm actually not
I'm not
sure.
sure. I think it's like the 6th of January. There were like a
Yeah,
few thousands, I think. So Russia and the US have met in Saudi Arabia alone, without Ukraine at the table, without Europe at the table. We will come to that bit later
mhm,
on with Europe. Trump is very fond of Putin. We know that. He calls him his friend. He says he has good relationship with him. And basically, what was the takeaway from the first talk is that, of course, both sides want to end the war, but Trump has no issue with Russia putting their points on the negotiation table, and it looks like he will even help them achieve those. Then there was kind of this resolution in the UN where the US and Russia both voted in favor of.
mm,
And I think the most devastating thing about the resolution was that it didn't see Russia as the attacking force. Also, a great sign of how Trump thinks about Ukraine and Russia and what happened there. He also
mm,
said it in front of the media, like he blamed Ukraine and Zelensky for. He said, I mean, he said that even before he got elected. He said it takes two to tango. So he showed
mm,
kind of in which direction he's
mm,
going. So then he said, okay, you shouldn't have started this war. So that was what he said towards Zelensky because he was pissed off that Zelensky didn't want to make the resource deal with him. Well,
mm.
then our, the new daddy of Europe, Emmanuel Macron, the wannabe daddy of Europe,
Yeah.
went to the US to basically show that Europe isn't dead, and it was a lot of touchy with Trump. It was a lot of
Mm,
"you're my greatest friend, I love you,"
mm,
like really awkward. So Macron praised himself for making this deal possible. And what that deal is how would Trump say, a very bad deal for Ukraine.
Mm. Mhm.
So they create a common fund. The US will put in some money, but most of the money will come from Ukraine's resources, which the US will ultimately have their hands on. The fund is supposed to reconstruct Ukraine, but also the US will have a say in where the money goes and how it will be reconstructed.
Mm.
So basically, this deal will lead to the US having a say in almost every important point for Ukraine, which I assume, to be honest, is actually what will help Putin reach his goals.
Mm.
Because with Ukraine, with US having their hands on Ukrainian resources
Yeah.
without any security deal in return, not really in that agreement.
Mm.
Once they all go to the negotiation table, Putin will say, I want Crimea, I want the Donbas region. Zelensky will say no. Trump will say, well, you signed a deal, you have no choice because I will block the shit out of reconstructing your country now.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's how I see it. At least it's kind of a blackmailing mechanism,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
and it's far from a good deal for Ukraine.
Yeah, yeah. There's lots of like sovereignty concerns about like, giving 50% of your natural resources to an imperialist country that has a record of, exploiting natural resources of other countries or starting wars to destabilize those countries. And now it comes to you and asks for 50% of the control over the management of those resources. Like, I would not trust anybody else. And now we are even talking about the US, and it's I feel really, really sad for, Ukrainian people who are just being played as pawns in this geopolitical game over resource extraction and like the capitalist, agendas that they have of like making massive, massive money. This is, by the way, like a classic playbook scenario of how France, the US, the UK have actually kept African countries under colonial control by expropriating their resources, first creating destability, calling it terrorism,
Yes, yes.
jumping in to help with military aid, but in exchange for military for natural resources, and then like fucking them completely over. So this is exactly what we see happening in Ukraine. There's a lot of sovereignty concerns. There are no clear military guarantees given to Ukraine in exchange for this deal. There's no clarity about the future direction of this deal, of like what it could go towards in terms of exploitation. That's also something that
Hmm.
is like, absolutely unclear. And with this president, like, you don't know the future potential of exploitation, right? It could very well end up becoming the economic colonization of Ukraine by the US. I'm not sure how much the US would be willing to share that wealth with Russia. But as you said, it might be actually possible that, they may find it like a good deal to share things among themselves. And, Ukraine basically is the loser out of
I
these
mean, the
two.
interesting part is that I think Putin has made the suggestions that they mine together the resources because
Yeah.
obviously Russia is closer and can
Yeah.
provide the infrastructure for that. So why wouldn't the US be interested in this deal?
Yeah.
It's less investment for them at the end, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
so it's a good deal. But I think overall what you see right now with all those players in the world, what changed really
Hmm.
is just how transparent they become about everything.
How overtly, yeah.
Yeah, Trump isn't necessarily doing things that others haven't done before him, but
Yeah.
he's transparent about it and very open and very proud
Mhm.
in doing so. So, as you said, many things we see now the US doing, they have been doing for decades. I mean, minus the renaming stuff on the map and,
Mm.
which others weren't that interested in.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe that's also the opportunity for people to see the true face of colonialism and imperialism.
Absolutely.
While before we had to explain a lot and,
Exactly. Exactly.
provide evidence and so
Exactly.
on.
Exactly. Like, there was this myth that we have actually decolonized Africa, or, so what is the problem? Like, people don't understand the difference between political decolonization, yes, which was achieved around the 1940s, 50s, and later, but the economic decolonization has still not been achieved. Like, so we
Mm.
can only imagine from that framework how many years further will Ukraine be dependent on the US for its economic development, and where that could lead, nobody knows the answers to that question. In this situation, I mean, I feel really, really sorry for Ukrainian people, and I'm in full solidarity with,
Me too, yeah.
with the people about what's happening. But in the more broader geopolitical context, I always have this feeling of like Schadenfreude, like bitter joy, or like, because this has been happening to the developing world, to the global south, and nobody paid attention at all. It was always covert. It was never so overtly done. It was done with, like, promises of liberal democracy, and, we're saving the women, we're countering terrorism, this, that. And millions, like almost 12 million people have been killed in this war on terror, or war on Muslim people, basically, in the last 2 decades or so. And now we start to see the most obvious shape of this US imperialist force, like, coming brutally, and like showing its ugly as fucking face to the world, that this is who we are, and this is
Yeah.
what we are about to do. And I really, really hope that now is the point where Europe, like, really finds its identity and realizes that no, we have been, too dependent, too comfortable with this relationship with the US, and it has not benefited the world, and it will not benefit us. Now we see it. And, I really hope this changes.
Absolutely. And I think one thing to point out, which what pisses me off about Europeans voting right-wing parties, for example, is the arrogance and sitting there and
Yeah.
being like, oh, before everything was better, we want to go back to when the economy was great and so on. And I'm like, do you realize that everything that we have in Europe, almost everything, especially in the Western countries of Europe, you have built this on a pile of dead people and blood and
Yeah.
exploitation. So history just hitting you in the face is not exactly a position of victimhood where you're like, oh, now look, we need to be strong again. We have to. That's the bed you made, and now lay in it.
Yeah.
That's kind of what people have to realize. And also, we will talk about Germany later, but I have to mention this now. Like Germans being like those refugees, and I'm like, well, who supported the U.S. in all the wars?
Yeah,
Why do these people lost their home because you didn't give a shit? If
exactly.
you didn't want refugees, then where were you all these years? And you were not on the street protesting these wars. No, you were comfy at your couch and looking on TV and being like, oh, those barbarians in Afghanistan. I'm glad we're
Mm.
helping out. That's just pure ignorance.
Where do we even start the cycle from? So it starts with, like, US European imperialism, right? Like, military agendas, they go for resources to North African, Middle Eastern countries. They start a war, destabilize the country, which produces lots and lots of refugees. When they come to Europe, because of the war started by this NATO transatlantic alliance, like, of Europe and the US, then we have right wing people who are complaining about the fact that refugees are coming here. However, they have directly benefited from the fact economically. Like, obviously, a person working in Aldi or, Lidl, who has nothing to do and votes for the AfD, who has nothing to do with the war. Like, I mean, they cannot see the link in it. But, like, the
Hmm.
economic benefits, they have reaped these economic benefits for over years. And this is what people fail to understand, that, like, now the austerity can be easily blamed on refugees, sure. But the cycle, it still continues, because the EU now, the EU Commission, funds dictatorships in Tunisia and Egypt, like extremely, extremely volatile situations in these countries regarding human rights. And we are giving them 500 billion euros or something in deals to keep the refugees at bay outside of Europe. And how does that happen? Also
Yeah.
through human rights abuses, like grave, grave human rights abuses.
I
So
mean,
this, yeah,
look, even within Europe, if you look in Eastern Europe,
yeah,
especially at the former Yugoslavian countries, they Europe has been working hard for them to be destabilized, to be have super corrupt governments, etc.
yeah,
Now Germany goes into Serbia being like, we want your lithium, It's great. I mean, I talked to Ivana about this,
Yeah.
from DM25, and she rightfully so says, why do you want to pollute our land? You have lithium, pollute your own. No,
Yeah.
no, but the technology is safe. Well, if the technology is safe, then go ahead.
Mhm.
So this is even within Europe, you
Yeah.
have this arrogance of we are the Western countries, we are powerful. I mean, Germany is still the third biggest economy of the world.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I mean, look at North Macedonia. We are waiting for what since 2004 to become a member of the EU.
Mm.
People don't give a shit anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and rightfully so. But since we started talking about Europe, I think we also have to
Yeah. Distinguish between the Eastern Europe and the Western Europe for sure. For sure.
I would like to always talk about Europeans. And
Mm.
I am not a non-EU member, but I feel like a European. I don't give a shit about ancestry also, but
Mm.
still I'm a European,
For
like
sure.
from generation. So every time when I feel like, and I think this applies to everyone in Eastern Europe, when
Mm.
people talk about Europe and
Mm.
you're like, yeah, sure. We are just over here. We are kind of we are this gray spot on the map. Thanks for that. Like makes totally sense.
Hi
So
guys.
yeah. Not to mention that nobody ever knows where the country is I'm coming from. Like, where is that? It's in Europe. Where? Like next to Greece? Oh yeah, I love Greece. I mean, I
Mm.
love Greece too, but it's
Yeah.
our famous neighbor and us.
Mm. Yeah.
Anyways, but let's also talk a bit about the Munich Security Conference, because I think that that has also told us a lot about Europe and in what shape it is. Do you want to go into that?
Yeah. So at the Munich Security Conference, I mean, one of the highlights was JD Vance's right wing speech, which was bashing against all European leaders and elites for, suppressing freedom of speech. And I think he also mentioned about German elections and then got like some lashback that, yeah, he should not interfere, obviously in support of the far right party AfD. And yeah, like I mean, the whole climate in terms of like this Western alliance that Europe has with the US, it was kind of seen as like a little bit like crumbling, a little bit like in question marks surrounding all over it, because the speech was completely destroying the European order and like was attacking the fact that we have social welfare system here, we have like we have like a democratic freedom of speech, which also punishes those who commit hate speech crimes. And his version of what he wants Europeans to do is to have like a fully fascist regime, which demonizes people, which allows, this is for them freedom of speech, which lets transgender people be marginalized, or like any kind of like small marginalized groups be should become the target because freedom of speech. Like absolutely horrible. However, there was another highlight, which was the fact that one of the chairman of the Munich Security Conference, he gave a speech, a closing speech, and he started tearing up. Let's hear some of his words.
With Ewald von Kleist, this conference started as a transatlantic conference. After the speech of Vice President Vance on Friday, we have to fear that our common value base is not that common anymore. I'm very grateful to all those European politicians that spoke out and reaffirmed the values and principles that they are defending. No one did this better than President Zelensky. Let me conclude, and this becomes difficult.
Right. So
I mean,
yeah,
come on. It's a sign of the times. This
yeah,
this part, because again, a lot of leftists, a lot of activists, a lot of politically engaged people have pointed this out, this development in Europe, for so many years, for
Yeah.
so many years. And to see them now realizing the errors of their ways is, I don't know, it's just mind blowing. And those are supposed to be leaders and the smart people that have very important positions. And now their kind of perception of the world and the world order they knew, and the world order in which they were brought up in, like, if you work for NATO, this is how the world functions. If you are in a European government, this is how the world functions.
Yeah.
And now there's this US administration that just doesn't give a shit about any previous order. They just do how they please, and have a fully different agenda that which doesn't include Europe. And why would it? Because Europe is, what is Europe? We just
Mhm.
had that. What the fuck is Europe? And not to mention the EU. It's this union which exists. They, okay, I mean, I guess 50% of policies in parliament, like in the German parliament, are from the EU,
Mm.
essentially. So they are a policy machine, full stop. With a parliament that gets kind of elected, but the head of the commission doesn't get elected, which is the most important position. With von der Leyen, we have the most creepy politician I could
Mm.
imagine in Europe, leading such an union, and that's it. But it doesn't have any relevance on the world stage, and they
Yeah,
just realize that they don't.
absolutely.
And this is why he
Absolutely.
cried. That's what he's crying about. Like,
Yeah.
I'm irrelevant.
Our time is gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, the last year, I think, not just the political elites, but also like many young Europeans who grew up with this, identity or this way of seeing themselves and seeing the role of Europe in the world, which was like, oh yeah, we care about human rights. We are, like, we care about liberties, personal liberties. We are a free world. We are a union, so we also care about international cooperation. The last year has basically shown in a very small, compact amount of time that how untrue has this worldview been, because many things have started coming up and people have become more critical. There's like a critical consciousness that I see, at least among my friends. I see among like people who did not engage with international topics or like topics of political relevance from a, how can I say, left or a critical perspective. They were more like the Erasmus kids, right? Who
Mm.
just go and enjoy the benefits of being in the EU. And now they're starting to see the ugly truth and realities which are hiding behind this facade of, yeah, we are the European Union. So I think it's a defining moment. And also these tears also show, like, a leader on, one of the most important conferences starts tearing up. Like, there's like a clear dissonance between the goals of this conference, what he has
Mm.
said throughout the conference, reaffirming alliances and security and this and that, and then connecting it with the values, and then he starts to tear up because it's absolutely false. Which values? Like, which values do you talk about when you're
Yeah.
like opening a bazaar of weapons? Like, no, there are no values. That means.
I think the values that the people remember are, in the 80s, you had like Life Aid and so on. So you had to put up the biggest rock show in the
Mm,
world for people to sit in front of the TVs, watch entertainment, and think about the people in Africa.
mm,
That's because I don't know where I read it. I think I saw it somewhere on social media where there was so much more awareness in the 80s
mm,
about these things. I'm like, literally, the amount of money that was needed to be spent for you to turn your head in that direction was ridiculous. I mean, Life Aid also gathered a lot of donations. Fair enough. I'm not bashing the whole project, but still, it's entertainment. It's like Western entertainment over the suffering of other people. Now Europeans are crying because they're not well. And you're
yeah.
like, and I'm like, who are you crying to, by the way? I mean, if the bully at the schoolyard makes you cry, you go to your mommy. So who is he crying to? Like,
Mm,
are they after the camera is off, I imagined like they all go in a circle, like you know, holding each other, being like, "I get you, dude. I get you." It's men should cry if they want to cry, also publicly.
Sure,
But
sure.
in this in this moment, I'm like, that's awkward, dude. Get your shit together. That's kind
Yeah.
of what are you what are you signaling?
Exactly. It's basically, the biggest hypocrisy of this conference, right? Like you're basically organizing this conference and you know that this will, like, every deal that you make is like going to result in the blood of millions of people, and then you're crying. Like there's just like such a big disconnect between those two things.
Mm,
I find it really hard to empathize with this man because
me
why
too.
what is there for you to cry about? Because you are the devil. Do you not understand your role in this? Like, do you not understand what this is all about? You are the devil. Why are you crying?
But
um,
then the one person that has been in a war for I don't know 3 years now is going the Ukraine war. I think it's 3 years, right?
yeah,
Um,
painting,
so
yes.
he goes on the stage and he's like more or less saying, "Get your shit together. We need a European army." And then Le Daddy Macron comes and says, "Yes, I support that. Let's do a European army." And now we have that. It's kind of a very European thing to be in the midst of a pile of shit. And the first idea that comes to our minds is, how do we create an army? Because,
Yeah,
so eh, very European. But on that topic with the army, I think and I think that's a common DiEM25 stance, which I can also present in that regard, is logically that who is going to lead this army? Like, who
right.
is going to. We are not a real union. We are not a United States of Europe where we have an elected government and a defense minister and so on. So there is no way this can work. We need, first of all, if so, a proper union which has common fiscal policies, common politics, and so on. But we are far from that. I think we can agree. So, in my opinion, the only thing, and this is what Merkel said on that topic,
Mm,
um, is that it will look something like NATO light, like
mm,
a defense mechanism alliance of European countries,
mm,
which with underlining the defense
mm.
part.
Yeah,
But we have NATO, so that's BS. And if NATO isn't anymore, I think we have to rethink our lives either way, and we have to do that.
yeah.
So this is not a time for reactionary uh, things like bringing in a European army, where it's just a delusional proposal to make.
Yeah.
This is a time where we have to sit down and, what you said, talk about what are our values, how much do we want a Europe which is for real the Europe that we just acted that it is before,
Mm,
or are we just going to weasel our way through geopolitics, which
yeah.
is what I see Europe is doing essentially.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it kind of feels like going back in time, because I mean, there's like so many things which are at the moment like wrong with Europe, like recession, austerity,
Mhm.
like social inequalities are rising. And the first thing that comes to their mind is like, oh yeah, but we need weapons. Excuse me? Don't you need like a deep seek, European version, or like something else
you know
technology
this
wise?
you know this meme where they show what US is doing, China is doing, and then you have the
Yeah.
picture of Europe having this plastic bottle with a cap stick to it, like that's our accomplishment.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But I think part of the strategy to, revive the economy, because like there's nothing which is like labor is too expensive to produce things here, apparently. Like there's not much investment that they want to do into stimulating the economies, but they do want to make money through weapons. And this is something that we will see, like a militarization of societies, of countries within and across Europe. And yeah,
Mm.
I'm really afraid of this version of like a NATO 2.0 European army. And yeah, like I mean, also if you look at coming to German elections now, Also the reversal of like the governing party and how much the right-wing parties, well, I consider CDU to be equally right-wing to the AfD, because if
Mhm.
you look at the policies that they have in regards to especially minority rights and things that matter, which for AfD make them right-wing, they're very similar. Deportations,
Yes.
they want deportations. Hatred against minorities, they want it. LGBTQ rights, they want to slash them. Like it's very very similar. And now we are back to like after 16 years of a CDU government. We saw like, okay, there is some fresh hope for Germany, and now we're back to a CDU majority government, and also like a big chunk of the votes went to the right wing, far right wing
Mhm.
AFD, which is absolutely scary. And what was also shocking for me to see is that I mean, already in the last government, I think only 34% of the seats belonged to women, and now it will be 32% or so.
Mhm.
So it's, what the heck? We are like 50% of the population, if not more. And there's like only 30% of the women which are deciding over the lives of, like a population which is clearly split into half. Yeah, it's scary, and many things
Yeah.
will go in reverse.
And we also have now a chancellor who at the time voted against a policy to protect women from abuse at home, like within the marriage and so on. So he is not exactly a feminist as well. So the less influence women will have on this administration, the more dangerous it will be for women. And we are also talking abortion laws here, which nobody pointed out, but with somebody like Merz, it's possible that he will go Trumpish on these topics. I know he has children. I hope he has a daughter who can sit him down and be like, no, 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 no. But other than that, it's really up in the air how this will play out for minorities in Germany.
Yeah, yeah,
I think with the German election, there is so much already said everywhere, and I think mostly people are aware of how it went. The left party was very strong, almost at 9%, for example, because there is just no other military industrial complex party. Which, I mean, Die Linke has also their fair share of missteps in this direction, but for people, it was kind of the only party that has not declared themselves a future partner of the CDU. Basically, I think that's also a major point. And also, when the CDU voted together with the AfD before the election in parliament, I saw the speech of the one link politician, and it was a very strong speech. So I think that from a perspective of people who live in Germany, 9% for a left party is a good sign for us,
yeah,
in my opinion. Um, it's nice to know that there are still a lot of people in Germany out there who put their vote on a party that has a focus on social issues, because otherwise I would think, okay, Germans have become you know every
hmm,
German has a heart of stone if you look at how people elect.
yeah,
And with the AfD, interestingly, some interesting fun facts is the AfD is not so strong in cities. So where we
yeah,
have most migrants, most
yes,
refugees, the most intersection between German citizens and migrants, there the AfD is not strongest. Where the AfD is stronger, though, is where we have the least migrants and no refugees. So you can see it's kind of, first of all, what it tells me is, and I'm from Frankfurt, so I mean,
mm,
that's where I lived my whole life. So we are kind of an internationalist city where you have not just migrants from all different backgrounds living there, but you also have a lot of tourists and so on. So you run in different cultures and different people all the time. And I think one key to understanding somebody is to have contact with them and
yeah,
to have them as your neighbors and so on and so on. Where you have not so many migrants within the small cities or villages, people just think about the topic based on what they read on newspaper. I think this is a
yeah,
very, very
absolutely.
crucial thing to point out. And also, even if they don't see those problems in their lives, they are kind of, it's going bad in Germany. It's really bad, bad. It's like, okay, so you're under threat, because I don't think they have an answer to that
Mm,
directly, but they will
yeah,
just tell you that the statistics they see on their social media bubble, they provide them the evidence that it's an important topic.
mm-hmm.
The other thing is, we have to talk about this. German unification
Right.
is
Yeah.
absolutely went wrong. There is
Mhm.
a unification in terms of how the map looks,
Yeah.
that, but in terms of wages, in terms of, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
you could point out every statistic possible.
Mhm.
And Eastern Germany will be, compared to Western Germany, behind.
Yeah.
So I think there is a huge issue with that.
Yeah.
There was a unification, everyone celebrated, and then everyone forgot about it, kind of.
Yeah.
And Western
Absolutely.
Germany has the most industry, the most everything.
Yeah.
So nobody did any kind of planning, I guess.
Yeah.
Nobody sat down and was like, okay, how do we develop what we have in Western Germany into Eastern Germany? How do we really help and provide infrastructure, etc., etc.? That
Yeah.
none of that has happened. So you see a lot of dissatisfaction in Eastern Germany, which is
Absolutely.
understandable. But I don't know if you have to really vote AfD for change. But
Yeah. 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 The thing is, like, the direct connection between neoliberal austerity politics and the right wing is often overlooked when
mhm,
we, like, unite behind the facade of, like, we are all against fascism. I mean, the centrist people who are not on the left or either way, but they know that AfD is the evil that must be prevented. But they don't address the deeper concerns of, like, why is it happening? They
mhm,
just take it as a condition, like, oh yeah, in Eastern Germany there is, like, less development, so people become more prone to propaganda. Like, no, actually in East Germany people actually have, like, real concerns as well, as you said.
yeah,
Like, people don't have enough money. Like, every fifth child, I mean, in Germany, across Germany, is, like, living in poverty now.
yes,
And in Eastern Germany the situation is just much, much worse. And these people don't have, probably, like, just to sympathize with them a little bit, they don't have the privilege to, understand their material condition fully, to understand who is to be blamed for this, the lack of money that they have, or, like, that why do I have to work two jobs to just make ends meet? Why is my child not able to, afford things that they would like to give to the child? So the
mhm,
easiest version of that, who takes the blame, is the immigrant, right?
mhm,
So obviously these people are prone to things, but the root causes, we always address the symptoms. The root causes of these economic inequalities, we never end up tackling. We never end up, like, talking about, like, okay, the economic austerity is also worse. So, how about to counter right-wing fascism, instead of just, bullshitting against the AfD, we actually do something which makes the lives of these people better.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's quite
Ye-
missing from the discourse.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so easy to just go into the spiral of hating each other, and
Yeah,
but it leads nowhere. And history has proven that it doesn't.
yeah,
I think that's one part of the reason why Trump got reelected in the US, for example,
yeah,
is because every government does something, you know.
yeah,
So even the previous government, or the still government in Germany, has done good policies, but they're not dominating the public perception.
mm,
And still we are in a recession, and still there's a lot to do, and still it's not enough. It's just simply not enough. And then you look at the US and Biden, a lot of executive orders that Trump canceled on the first day, for example, are now hurting people. Where he had some funding for farmers, where they would buy equipment and the state would refund them the money.
yeah,
He canceled that executive order, and now farmers are realizing that's bad for them, because they don't get the money back. So a lot of them will just simply lose their farm because they cannot pay the bills, or
yeah,
they counted on getting the money back. So these were policies from the Biden administration. And it's not that governments are per se, I mean, some truly are, but these kind of governments are not per se bad. It's just that people never focus on what has been accomplished. They only focus on what's still not accomplished. And therefore, you create hysteria. And parties like the AfD and Trump are extremely well and
mm,
capitalizing on the difference, on what hasn't been done yet.
yeah,
So they work with fear, with, dystopian pictures of how everything looks. I live here in a village in Germany. I'm
mm,
like, the world and my personal perception of life is not matching at all. Like, I mean, it's very small. It's like a 900 people small kind of thing, and it's
Yeah.
only we have like the windmills everywhere around. So it
Yeah.
for me, it's kind of I have to actively watch the news to be like the world's going to shit. If I would never go to the internet or watch TV, I would probably think the world is super fine. And I think that a lot of that applies to the Western world, where there's a lot things going fine compared to other countries, or as we talk to Africa, or extremely suppressed countries where you have war, like we'll talk about Congo, what's going on, Gaza, Ukraine, you name it. So compared to that, your life is amazing.
That's
So
true.
stop acting
That's
like you are I don't know, you are kind of the most oppressed person on the planet because some person somewhere in Germany has attacked somebody, and now that's your biggest fear. It's so irrational, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like the thing is we always end up doing as human beings, and especially as in group, out group, with this framework of thinking, we often do upwards comparison. What do we not have?
Yes,
Who is earning
exactly.
more? Who is, doing better? Like we never do downwards
Don't tax the
comparison.
rich, because someday I will be rich.
Yeah,
That's
exactly. Exactly. Like, no, wake up. You will never be that rich. We're talking about the 1%. It's absolutely crazy, because I mean, like, yes, there is austerity also within Germany. There is poverty even within Germany, but like we have arrived at a point of development where, if you want to become an artist, you can actually become an artist. Like, there's enough
Yes.
programs, enough funding. Like, I mean, it's not great. I'm not going to say that, artists have a great life or something. Yes, you will be poor and you will struggle, but like for many people, this
common artist thing, you will be poor.
yeah, it's still
Yeah,
the
it's true,
reality.
yeah.
It's still the reality. But what I mean is that you will not be homeless. You will not just, like end up on the streets just because you chose to follow your passion. And I
That
think
might change after with Merz, but
hopefully not.
yeah, hopefully
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. But yeah, like looking at, for example, what happened in Congo, like this is like one example that, if you tell something like that to somebody who's living in a village and is like, surrounded just by German media or like local news channels, like for instance, a big atrocity took place in Congo, in DRC, where there's like a big conflict since years now over resources, and a lot of rebel groups are fighting with each other over the control of areas that are rich in resources. These resources are what make the basis of our phones, tablets, laptops. So therefore, there is also a direct link between exploitation through Western companies such as Intel, Tesla, Apple. Like most of these companies extract their minerals through the operations of these rebel groups. So there is a direct link, but we never hear about these things. What happened in Congo in January is that there was a prison where there was like a prison break, like of around 4,000 prisoners and so. And when they escaped from the prison, because the M23 rebels took over, they first went to the women's wing of the prison. They raped like over 150 women, and then they burnt them alive. They literally burnt them alive. And like that also, it's like women are definitely way more, women's rights are violated way more in international conflicts, international, wars and so on. But it's like such a sad atrocity which does not even make it to our screens, with the screens which are exactly funded by the blood of those very people. It's the saddest reality, but we are only concerned about like the material things that we don't have in Europe, or the material things we are lacking or could have had. So yeah, like I mean, it's really important for us to also just encouraging viewers to also inform themselves about like what's happening in the rest of the world outside of Ukraine. Gaza, yes, rightfully deserves a lot of attention, but also so does Congo and Sudan and other parts of the world that we do not hear about. And the thing is, like, what do we have to do? We sometimes think, what do we have to do? Like, it's all connected. Like, globalization has not just been a blessing, but also a curse. which means that every single conflict you can actually find the direct or the indirect linkages to Western imperialism. And most of the times it's a direct link. Rwanda is backing the M23 rebels to create this destability across the region, especially in Congo. And Rwanda, has been supported by the US and the UK through military aid, through financial aid, through diplomatic aid, like diplomatic support and cover. However, it is playing an active role right now in committing the genocides, the massacres that we are seeing in DRC Congo right now.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think, globalization in terms of cooperation with amongst countries and helping each other would be great, but globalization is basically a tool for exploitation
Yeah.
on a massive scale. And as you said, of course they don't want this in the media. They, I mean, when the news came that I think in Taiwan or even in Japan or in China, people were kind of, suicide rates went up, especially amongst people with working for, chip companies with produced chips for Apple, for example. It made the news and it was very uncomfortable for them. So they tried to bury the topic very fast. And the same like with Congo. Congo has been, I think 2 years ago, I don't know how many hundreds of millions people were under threat of hunger in Congo. It didn't make the news as well. And I saw just few people were pointing it out. That's why it ended fortunately up in my bubble, but I was like, what the fuck is going on? And I know that in Congo, for example, you have, I think, the biggest lithium reserve. So there has been a French company and an Australian company fighting over the rights to mine there. That has been going on. I remember because I researched it a few years ago. We're talking French company and Australian company, right? So nobody gives a shit if the people of Congo have a right to their own resources. Why wouldn't they be able to mine their own resources and sell them to you? Because, that country might become stable and rich at the end of the day. And this is why they need this multi-complex tool of supporting fractions within countries which steer the pot, which always, they don't give people a break. So you have this civil unrest continuously, then a mixture of either undermining any kind of government that tries to be like Congo first. That would never happen in any of those countries. The West will intervene immediately. Then in regards to tools like giving them loans, which like that's also an old mechanism where they say, okay, if you want to mine your resource, you need money for that, right? So we loan you the money with all the other things in place with the civil unrest. So you don't have a functioning economy in that sense. So you won't be able to pay the money. Therefore, the resources or, the money from the resources falls into the hand of the one who loans you the money.
It's really sad. And for so long, like the West has been on this moral high horse that, we need to protect Africa from China's debt diplomacy. China is exploiting the resources. It's like a jealous person who has been doing exactly, much worse than what China is doing now, to African countries, now coming in to say Africa actually doesn't know what to do with its resources and we know better how to handle it. And China is really, really bad for Africa. So, they are trapping African countries with debt diplomacy. That's not what we did, this standpoint of we were doing better deals. No, it's still happening. It's still it's still the exploitation is still ongoing. And what China does in fact in these countries is China actually goes with a deal. Either you take a deal or you don't take a deal. And the thing is, if a country has natural resources, it's absolutely their sovereign right to decide whom they want to do business with, right? It's not up to Europe, it's not up to US to decide. However, in cases when African countries would reject proposals or the deals, which would be, more wins for these countries, exploitative countries, than themselves, then these countries would face obviously destability and intervention. And, suddenly there's a coup coming in. Suddenly we are, entering Libya and saving the Libyan people and ending up with a failed state afterwards. So West has very, very long exploited this factor. And the thing is, China is actually doing really good business with them. Like, China does not topple governments. China does not create this destability. China is actually saying, okay, if you take the deal, we do business with you. If you don't, we take it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely no comparison to the Western way of making deals, and but yeah, I think China has become a very interesting topic in terms of that it isn't. Nobody talks about China in that way, and I think that's also part of don't put China in the news in terms of where they stand in terms of technology. Don't put China in any positive context in the news.
Yeah.
And just disclaimer, we don't say China is perfect, but let's just for once focus on what's working in China. I think that's worth having a look at. I recently came across, and it's funny because I didn't initially know that there is a project in China which is now, I think, running for 10 years. It's called Made in China 2025, and we are at 25. So while everyone was kind of being caught by surprise that DeepSeek came up for free, being less expensive than OpenAI, and as efficient and as functional, yeah, everyone acted out like, how did they do this, and so on. So I recently figured they announced that 10 years ago. So China has made an agenda where their main goal was to say, in all technology industries, like chips and AI and quantum physics, all of the technologies, we want to be first. Like, we want to lead the science in every area and want to be on top of technology. And they delivered on it. And essentially it was their goal to develop this AI until this year. So it came out. It was not by surprise. It was just that nobody paid any attention. I mean, behind closed doors, I guess they do pay attention, right? But nobody has ever told the public, hey, look, China is really leading a lot of technological industries. And what I ask myself, and also I want to kind of put this little funny thing that happened with TikTok in the US, right? Where people, and I don't know how they how it came to their mind to just download then a Chinese app and be like, well, we go for a Chinese platform, but essentially the US banned TikTok for a day. So a lot of TikTok users found this other app, which in English it's called Red Note, but I think it's like Little Red Book. I think it's called in Chinese. People can correct me on that. I'm not sure. But yeah, they went on this platform. And then, I mean, I'm not using TikTok so much, to be honest. I'm scrolling through Instagram mostly. But I had a lot of videos coming up of Americans being like, the Chinese are actually nice people.
Yeah.
You know, oh, China isn't an underdeveloped country. I thought they live in huts and
God.
you know. So I was like, wow. I mean, we all make fun of the Americans because they cannot point one country on a map, right?
Yeah.
But to think that they thought like Chinese are living in like these little huts, you know. Although I think they have the picture of Vietnam much more than of China, to be honest, with that. So it's even more messed up than that. But they were kind of super surprised to see pictures of Shanghai and Hong Kong and, I mean, Hong Kong records, but, you know, all of these kind of major cities in China being like way more modern than any American city.
Absolutely. Like, and definitely way more modern than any European city. Like, I don't even know if there's like a high-rise building in Europe, like which one. And, you know,
to be fair, we have some skyscrapers in Frankfurt.
I've seen those, yes.
And to be also fair, at least we have real historical buildings instead in some cities.
That's true. That's what Europe is going to be, a historic continent.
A museum.
Exactly. Which is not too bad, you know.
Also fine.
It's fine.
A museum without an army, polite.
You have to accept friendly at some point, you know, like, this is your strength. Keep it your strength.
Absolutely. So back to China. back to China. I just wanted to show two videos essentially.
Yeah.
The one video is from 2009 or 9 years ago. I don't know, not 2009, but it's 9 years ago.
The State Council announced the action plan, which focuses on innovation-based industrial upgrades. The blueprint prioritizes 10 key sectors, including new information technology and new energy. Miao Wei, the Minister of Industry and Information Technology, said the plan is expected to fast-track China's transition from being a large manufacturer into a competitive global player.
We hope through 10 years' effort, China could become a second-tier player on the global manufacturing. That will also pave the way for the sector's further development.
Mr. Miao also says China is looking to integrate information technology even more in order to help its factories climb up the value chain.
The 18th CPC National Congress called for further integration of informatization and industrialization as a way to boost manufacturing. That's what Made in China 2025 focuses on and aspires to achieve.
The minister also acknowledges that China's manufacturing sector is facing headwinds, including structural adjustments, competition, and a fading low-cost edge. But he says the use of internet technology will become a powerful engine in driving the changes. 写信 CCTV.
Now let's take, that was 9 years ago, right? So let's take a look how it goes.
The rise of Chinese AI chatbot DeepSeek has taken the world by storm. Look at cars. It's overtaken the previous epicenters of motoring, selling more than any other country. And solar panels. China's responsible for an estimated 80 to 95% of the global supply chain. By 2028, it's predicted that 60% of the world's renewable energy will be generated in China. In the futuristic world of quantum computers, Chinese scientists publish more quantum-related research papers annually than any other country. And they're even ahead of the general leaders, the US, in some areas of quantum computing development. And it's the same picture in AI. Chinese AI firms now issue more patents than any other country. So how has China done all this? Well, it's all part of a long-term plan. Across 10 target technologies, the plan set out more than 250 mini-goals. And according to analysis from South China Morning Post, 86% of them have been ticked off. But Made in China 2025 has been hailed a success by many other analysts too.
Here we are in Europe, not even able to meet the 1.5 degrees goals. And, China is like on another planet.
Absolutely. And I also heard from people that even the pollution in their cities has gone back drastically, like where you had to wear a mask standard to be able to breathe in the major cities. Now with most of the cars being electric and COVID has helped them. I heard from a friend like that when COVID happened and everything was kind of standing still for a bit. After that, the smog never came back, funnily. So they benefited from that. But yeah, it's kind of, we have to ask ourselves why. Like not how they have been able to achieve this in the sense of science, but in sense of they have the will, they made a plan, they saw it through. And I think one thing to point out is that's the upside to being a socialist one-party country. Is the party makes a plan, the party sees the plan through. There is no election, no interference, no opposition. I mean, they have opposition in that sense. Taiwan is their biggest opposition, which is not in China, but Taiwan is kind of like the moral brain when it comes to China. Pointing out their failures, also in regards to human rights. Although Taiwan has I think, very conservative government as well, like right wing. I think for our standards, the Taiwan government would not be our biggest friend. But yeah, you certainly have also human rights issues with China, but I think that's the part of Western story, is to be like, remind yourself of human rights in China. Don't look there. It's horrible there. But when you look then at Made in China 2025, 2025, it's kind of like, well, we will never achieve this because there will be no government, as I call them, our zombie governments will never be able to see them through, because after 4 years, I mean, they couldn't even do a 10-year plan, because after 5 years, everyone will be, oh, you didn't accomplish anything, I'm going to vote for the other one. Then our parliaments don't have enough majority to see policies through. So it's really ridiculous. There is no possibility in Europe, let alone on a European scale, to implement such projects and to catch up to that technology. And China has been able to really say, okay, we focus, we want to be leading in those industries, and we will put everything we have into that. China is getting also very attractive for people to work there. So people that study here in technology will probably look for China to have, in the best research in the field. If it's in China, this is where young people will go at some point.
Absolutely. And I think like we give, I mean, not just too little credit to China. We just demonize China overall completely and overlook how much, China has done good for its people. Like, 1 billion people. How do you manage a population of 1 billion people? And a lot of the times this story is spun around to say that, like they've been able to make progress because look how much they exploit their people. And the thing is, like, exploitation of people, I mean, I'm not even sure if this is like, if it has any legitimate concerns anymore when you see like China has been able to lift its entire like 80 to 90% of the population out of poverty in a very, very short period of time, which European governments have done across like 400 to 500 years of colonization, of enslaving people, of like stealing resources, stealing wealth, committing genocides after genocides and massacres after massacres to take, a large chunk of the population out of poverty. Yes. But, what China has done in a very short amount of time, we see in Europe, like now going in reversal. So like, what right do we have to say that, like China is like, not an alternative for like a leading world order, which could, actually do a better job than the US actually. Like, I mean, the US has just caused destruction all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we don't have a right to judge them. That's the point. We simply do not have the right to do that. China hasn't done anything to most people. In most countries, if you say, well, what country has hurt you the most? I doubt that many countries will say China, right? They pretty much like to keep to themselves and are as you said, like cooperational partners, business partners, etc. But they have taken over the world. In that way, and they haven't sent their military out to all four corners of the world to do that. They are just leading in technology, leading in so many in so many layers of lives, to say, because technology will be playing a huge part in our survival as well. Renewable energies, for example.
But I think, hey, you should not forget we have freedom of speech here.
I think there's a lot to think about in terms of things we don't know, and not being so sure that we already know everything about every country, right? And I have to say, in regards to China, I have been one of those people very blind to the reality of China. I was just not looking into it. It wasn't that I was running around being like, oh, China is the biggest threat on the planet, but I was kind of like, it gave me kind of the creeps because I just didn't know enough about it. And just in the recent months or years, I've met more people who were in China. I've met more people who even lived in China. And it slowly dawned on me that there is something wrong with the reality that I am having in my mind, and with the reality that is the reality, actually. So we will for sure keep an eye on developments in China, and also in Europe and our biggest clown show in the US. They should have like a disclaimer for entertainment purposes only.
Absolutely.
But I just want to say also that I'm glad when people comment on the video. And also, yes, it might be sometimes that we say something that's that some information is not 100% factual or something. So if you want to correct us, please do so. I think this is what the internet is for,
Yeah.
is to have a dialogue. And if we, fail to deliver on some topic and you give people the information, I think that's great. So do that, please. And also, I think in regards to keeping an eye on what's interesting in the world, you can also send us a message or write in the comments below if there's something you think is very important that we missed from the news cycle, maybe from a different country where you're coming from also. So we will be very, very interested in having that as well, so we can include it in future episodes. Thank you, Kinza. It has been a great pleasure to have you. I hope we will have many more episodes to come together.
Thanks a lot. I really enjoyed being on this episode as well. And I'm also looking forward to future episodes. And I really enjoy the format of this show because I think it does bring like perspectives. Like, of course, the news have been mentioned in the news cycle, but the perspectives that we bring, which are countering the mainstream narrative, I think it's really important to dissect those stories and talk about different framings and angles that are not as dominant in Western media. Really enjoyed it, and thanks a lot for having me.
We also try to summarize it because you cannot keep track of everything anymore. So we try to have everything in here that's important, so you don't have to watch 1,000 social media videos to know what's going on. So again, thank you, and I also thank you for watching. Looking forward to the next episode. Meanwhile, enjoy this one. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.